how to stand out in life and in your next job interview.
I'm really excited to be on the show today. We got to talking. We have several open positions at Abound Wealth and the Money Guys show. So that's kind of an announcement. We're hiring in case somebody is interested in coming to work for us. But that got us to thinking, as people who are on the other side of the interview table a lot, you especially, but now I have some years of it under my belt as well. What makes somebody stand out? What makes somebody like just nail that job interview?
I don't know if it's just through osmosis that we had done some content meetings, but got dinner for my daughters. They conned me into not cooking for them last night. Their mom was out with some girlfriends for a birthday dinner, and I was going to cook for them. Had this whole noodle sausage and all the ingredients, and they're like, "No, let's go out to eat." And I was talking to my oldest, and I was telling her because she's about to wrap up her ACT prep classes, and she wants to go get a job besides just babysitting and the pets. And I was like, "Honey, this is the best time in the world because people just need workers right now." So I said, "Don't just go take the first job that happens upon your circumstances like I did," because I worked at Hardee's all through high school because it was down the street from my house. They were the first place that offered me a job when I went and interviewed, so I took it, and that was good enough. But now I look at it, and I told my daughter, just because I didn't want her to fall into the same traps, I was like, think about and actually write down what you want to accomplish, based upon pay, life skills, what would be fun. And she named off something, and I was like, yeah, but there's nobody in that store, so you'll be bored and you won't work to be busy, so time flies. But I think the timing couldn't be better, and the fact we've done multiple shows recently on that 40% of Americans are considering changing jobs. We hear it's a daily occurrence that there's articles where employers are having a hard time finding employees. If you have ever considered changing jobs, this is an awesome opportunity. And here's the other thing. I was thinking about the show. I was like, man, we have a lot of financial mutants in our audience. They're not changing jobs. They probably love what they're doing. But this is kind of like when I read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And this is a business book, but then as I'm reading it, I'm like, man, this would be great for life. I'm going to use this in my relationship with my spouse, with my kids. I think today's show, even though this is about how to do well in your job interview, it really is about skills that can also serve you well in life too.
Yeah, I love that. Let's dive into it. So here's how to stand out in your next job interview. Our first thought is that you need to evaluate the opportunity. What's the risk reward of this job that you're applying to?
Yeah, I think sometimes people, look, we all hate change. I mean, I think it's a human nature. It's that fight or flight, risk that you don't want to put yourself out there, because we all hate rejection. Rejection is that thing. I mean, look, I was the world's worst on the dating scene. I don't want, there's lots of things in life, all of us as humans, we hate rejection. And so it's not uncommon where we look and evaluate job opportunities that if it's a difficult process, because I remember even like applying to colleges. If they required too long of an essay, I was like, whatever. No, I'm not doing, because I didn't want to go the extra effort. And that's a problem I think a lot of people face. But I want to give you kind of a contrarian way to look at this. If a process is difficult, if it has a moat around it where you're like, wow, if I go for this job, this is going to be a lot of work. Here's the way I want you to think about this. Every treasure-seeking adventure that we ever watch, you think about National Treasure with Nicolas Cage, you think about Rock with the Jungle Cruise, or any of these things that are going on, there's always going to be obstacles that face you. And I even have an experience share. When I was I think it was probably my junior year of college, I took my first tax class as an accounting major, meaning we had made it through all the intermediary accountings, we had made it through all the basic business accounting. Now we were getting into everybody in your room and in the class was an accounting major. And I remember when we had our first tax project, I recognized very quickly I was out of my waters, meaning in my comfort zone, and the fact that everybody else in the class, so the majority of what I perceived, had either their parents were in the accounting profession, they had an aunt or an uncle, there was somebody or maybe a next door neighbor who had told them, and they were all going to their friends and families' accounting firms to work on these tax projects. me coming from humble beginnings, nobody in my family doing anything like this. Because, my dad was a college athlete, so he had a PE degree. That's not exactly applicable
Not the
for
same thing,
accounting. My
yeah.
mom was a school teacher. So it's just, I remember thinking, man, I'm defeated. What am I doing here? I don't belong here. And I think a lot of people who are aspirational, or maybe you're the first in your family to consider a job in like the wonderful world of finance, don't get discouraged. I want to give you the visual that will change that negative into a positive. Is that when I got myself feeling depressed or down, I remember thinking, this clarity hit me that I was like, wait a minute. If I can knuckle it up and make it through this, my kids, my neighbors, my niece and nephew, if they want to get into the wonderful world of finance, I'm going to be able to be that bridge that breaks through the ceiling of opportunity. And that visual or that understanding of the situation gave me the context to say, yeah, it's going to be tough for me, but think of what I'm building bridge-wise forever. Do the same thing in your life. If there's a process when you're evaluating, easy might not be the path. Go hard, think long term, create a plan. And that's why when we say, number one, evaluate the opportunity, this applies. And this is the second point of this, Reby, and you can kind of talk about this too, because your interview was probably one of the most oddest interviews, is risk reward applies to job seeking.
Yes.
And this is what I'm talking about with difficulty as well, is that sometimes I think what feels safe, stable, well-training path and other things, they might even pay the most coming out the gates, won't be the biggest opportunity long term.
Right. I like that you saw, when taking your tax class, you saw the opportunity ahead of you. You could see the forest through the trees, right? And I kind of had a similar experience when I met you and Bo, because we had a mutual friend who just said, the guys at work need some help on podcast stuff. Mm-hmm. And that was pretty much what I had going into our first interview. And I will say, like, you guys are very, honestly, you're very structured, especially like on the financial planning side. That part was like rolling, right?
No, we got that part
But
figured
then
out.
the money guy side was still like, you were trying to figure some stuff out. So you didn't really have a job description for me.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you make fun of me, like, I don't know why you took this job after that interview. But I think it was all about opportunity assessment, because I knew I was looking for something different. I knew I was looking for a career path. I knew that who I worked with was just as important as what I was doing to me. Like, I was looking for somebody who I hit it off with, who I could respect, who I liked their mission. And all of those boxes looked like they were going to be checked after talking to you guys. So, again, it was like kind of a leap of faith in the sense that it was like, okay, I can see what they're doing and I think I can help them. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in and kind of create this job with them. And I think it has paid off great. Like, it's worked out and I love it. But that's kind of what I see as this first step of evaluating the opportunity. Like, is it worth the risk? Is it worth this extra effort? Because sometimes it is. And like, be really honest about what you're wanting. And even like the vibe that you're getting from this job, like, is this something you could see yourself doing? It might be worth the risk.
Yeah, and we spent a lot of time on this show talking about risk reward with investments, and without a doubt, your job search is definitely going to have the same risk reward profile. The more risk you take, there could be a great windfall opportunity, but is that what you need? Because remember, we also all the time talk about in the show, there's a difference between creating wealth and maintaining wealth. Maybe you don't need the high-flying, brand-new upstart company that, yes, is exciting, has the passion, like Reby saw, but maybe you just need a good, stable job that's going to have great benefits for your family. Nobody's going to be able to tell you the path. You have to do self-evaluation to figure out what's appropriate. I just want you to take away from this opportunity on step one, evaluating the opportunity, is packaging can be deceiving, so it's better for you to do your homework to know what's actually necessary for your situation.
And that leads perfectly into our second point. As someone who has sat as the interviewer in these situations, do your homework, and I added, do it thoroughly. Because I will say, I can tell when I'm talking to someone who hasn't really watched the Money Guy show, right? Or like who hasn't really clicked all around our website. And sometimes that's frustrating, especially if they're trying to work for the Money Guy show. It's like, well, this is really important. So have you checked it out? right?
And you definitely on interviewing for Money Guy employees. I think it's interesting because we use recruiting firms too for finding financial advisors and so forth. And I'm always amazed when people have done no more than just looked at our website.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, I want to give you the right context to attack life and understand things. When I say do your homework and then be put on here thoroughly, I want you to understand you will practically be living with these people. This is when you go and work a new job, especially if it's an in-person job, you will likely spend just as many hours of the day, if not even more, with your coworkers than you do actually with your friends and family. And I'm always amazed at how cavalier people are with their job hunting skills, that they just do interviews. I guess they're casting a wide net, when I would tell you to be much more targeted with how you're big game hunting. This is not fishing with wide nets. You're trying to find the perfect opportunity for your life situation. You've done your research, and this needs to come into play because it's just, I'm amazed when I interview somebody and I can tell they know nothing about me. They know nothing about what is driving the growth of this firm, like social media, like us doing the Money Guy show. And yet they come in and treat it like it's just a normal job interview. You're never going to get out ahead if you're just blending in with the drapes and the woodwork and you just read our website and then you came in the interview. That's not setting yourself up for success. Yeah. So be very specific with your research. I would tell you, even go figure out, before you go to an interview, figure out who you think, go on the About Us or the team page, figure out who you think will be interviewing you. Go Google them up. Go find out where they went to college, what their hobbies are, what organizations they're affiliated with. There might be an opportunity for you to use that to your benefit. Don't just show up after spending 3 seconds before the interview just perusing the website.
And with social media now, like, people post all kinds of things, like, especially like our firm's a good example. Like, you can find out a lot of things about the people who work here because we are very active on all that stuff.
Yeah, by the way, I would, that's not even on our list, but clean up your social media side.
because we might be doing the same thing.
Because believe me, employers are checking you out too. And I can remember, and look, it's been years enough ago, and I've interviewed a gazillion people, so I don't think he or she would notice. But somebody had on social media, I won't even say it out loud, but it was just, it created a visual that would be inappropriate for your boss, your mom or dad or a family member to, it was a funny little meme, but it was definitely not something that you put out on for the whole world to see. Be smart with your social media because your employer is checking all that stuff out.
Yeah. All right. So our third thing is to be a peacock. This is kind of a phrase that you and Bo have coined.
Yeah, I think that this is an important process because everybody looks the same. So how do you make yourself stand out? Because if you are like everybody else, it's hard for you to come off as that special person that is the perfect fit, like in Tetris, that is going to complete the board and let them go to the next level. And that's why, we put some quick tips in here, and then we'll even do some experience share and storytelling. Be confident and honest, because I think that, what I've found about life, this is something that's sad. When you need something, it's harder to get it. Think about money. Bankers don't like to give money unless you don't really need money. And we get more business when we don't need business. You think about when you're dating. Believe me, I've been married for 23 years. Just had my 23-year anniversary. So dating, I was way off. But I just remember when I was single, and I was horrible at this whole dating game, where I would go months without a date, and then you'd have one date. And you'd be seeing somebody, and I only do one at a time. I was not a multi-layer type person.
For the best.
But you would be dating somebody and didn't know if it was going to work out or not, and then you'd find out 2 other girls thought you were cute, and you're like, where were all these people while I was actually single? Yeah. So I'm just telling you is that be confident and honest, and understand that people can sense if you're in need, so try to get that under check. I'm not trying to tell you to fake it, but I'm just saying be confident and honest, because desperation typically doesn't sell well.
And own the things that you're good at, and own the things that you don't know. Don't try to just fudge your way through it, if you will.
Be prepared for gotcha questions. You know, this is something, by the way, maybe this is because we're financial advisors. Before I do any meeting with a client, I'm trying to think of what are the holes, what are the things that I'm worried a client might ask me that I'm just not going to be prepared for. Every one of you who's doing any type of interviewing, not only for jobs but sales, you ought to be kind of stress testing your entire situation to try to think of what are the hard questions. An example, we talked about this, was tell me something that is your biggest weakness. That is lazy interviewing, but it very likely could come up in any interview. Is tell me your biggest weakness. If you haven't figured out how to come up with an answer that is a negative that's actually a positive, you're doing it all wrong. So, and then show enthusiasm. This is probably because I put this in when we were talking about it, Reby, is that I got my first job. I think people assume once you reach a level of success that you were an awesome student, that I was sitting on the front row conversing with my professor and we were talking about all the theorems with accounting and all. No, it was not like that at all. I mean, if you saw my standardized test scores for SAT or ACTs, you'd be like, can that guy even write his name on a sheet of paper? Nobody cares about that after you've reached a level of success, but you do while you're younger or while you're trying to transition. You have to come off as somebody who's enthusiastic or has knowledge. So if you, like when I was trying to stand out from what I call the front row sitters, meaning the kids that work, because realize when I got my first accounting job, I was interviewing at a firm that pretty much everybody else in my class was interviewing for too. If they hadn't already been picked up by Ernst & Young and Arthur Andersen and those type of firms, those of us on the second tier of interviewing, they were being interviewed. You had to stand out. And what I did was I found out from the first interview that this CPA firm had a business in my hometown. I went and interviewed that client of theirs, and then I made sure that throughout that interview that I dropped that knowledge bomb that, hey, I took it upon myself I knew you were going to be interviewing me. I wanted to go interview your clients to make sure you were who I wanted to work with. They told me years later after I worked at this firm, that's why I got the job. Not because my GPA was better, not because they thought that I was the smartest guy that they were interviewing for that job at the time. They were impressed that I went above and beyond and showed enthusiasm or did the stuff that others weren't willing to do. Make sure you're figuring out a way to peacock yourself to stand out.
Yep, love it. All right, are we ready to move to point 4?
Well, I did. You had said this one. I don't want to take this one away. You'd asked about great questions because when you're interviewing, what happens? How do you close out an interview?
I always ask, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah.
And maybe this is I'm trying to give grace to who I'm talking to, of course. But if they just say, nope, I think that's it. Yeah. It kind of feels like, I just put a lot into preparing questions for you. Are you actually interested? It goes a long way for creating that chemistry or just showing that enthusiasm. Honestly, I think it's a really easy way to go above and beyond and prepare some questions in advance, whether it's based on your research or just based on honest questions you have about the job, about the day to day, about the company and how it works, things like that.
Yeah, you should definitely, they teach you if you go to FinCon podcast movement, and I'm trying to get better at this so we can have guests on the show, is how to be a better question asker and do interviews. And the first thing they teach you is actually have a true curiosity. So I think if your interviewer asks you, do you have any questions, you want to look like you're truly curious about something, so you show excitement or enthusiasm for the job. So come up with some type of question that you're truly curious about and use that in the interview. And that's actually a great segue into number 4. If you want the job, tell them.
Sometimes honesty is the best policy. It goes again with showing that you're interested, because I think at the end of the day, I want to hire someone who is interested and excited about the show. Sometimes that can trump knowing how to use this specific software. I could train you on some of these things, but I want to know that you're going to be passionate about what we're doing too. And so, yeah, sometimes just saying that you're excited goes a really long way.
Yeah, well,
for me,
Bo's not here to talk about it. He's out of town this week, but I mean, Bo basically talked me into hiring him because he called me 4 or 5 weeks after our initial interview. I didn't call him back. I wasn't planning on hiring Bo because I felt like he was too much like me. And then he called me up and said, "Hey, I thought we fit. I thought this was the perfect job. Why didn't you call me back? Or he was much more polite than that, but he did in a very Bo-esque way, did a great job of essentially talking me into hiring him. And this is something, I talked about this with the content team as we were putting this show topic together. I think if you're just doing a job, it's okay to play games and be coy and and try to hold your cards close to your chest, because it's probably one of those things where you're just one of a number. You're a cog in the wheel. Careers are a little different. Careers is kind of like a relationship. Like a job is like dating. A career is a relationship, because this is something that's going to be long term and stick around. And what's the first thing? And I hate to equate this to a birds and bees type moment, but you always hear a good, powerful relationship doesn't play games. And I think the biggest thing you can do if you want the job, tell them you want the job, and because I think that will go a long way. Because what I don't, and I've had it happen where I've offered people jobs and then they say no, and you're like, well, gosh, I should have gone with my gut. I could tell they really weren't into it in the interview. And that's what, it's much better if I go into an interview and I'm like, yeah, I think this is the person. They seem like they fit culturally into this group. This is the perfect person to go with. And then I've already buried the lead on this and the fact that I mentioned it, or I spoiled it, I should say. If you don't if you go to your best job interview and this is the perfect job, you know that you were put on the face of the earth to do this, and you do all your preparation, but it still hasn't worked out, call them, follow up, email them, figure out why, see what's going on or what you can do to, maybe you never know what's going to push that needle over, that maybe they're on the fence, maybe it's you or one other candidate, and you might be able to just do a little more peacocking, stand out, and the opportunity might be yours.
Yeah. So, and in closing, we just kind of wanted to let you in on, we said we're hiring. So we do have several positions available right now. We're looking for a financial advisor, a financial planning associate, a database associate. Those are all on the Abound Wealth financial side. And then also we're looking for a content marketing assistant to work with us on the show. So literally this is somebody I'm going to be in that interviewing process. And so we've got quite the range of like creative, financial, and it's a really exciting time. I love working here. So maybe you're our next hire.
So, because by the way, I could go through our whole workforce, and there's usually a money guy story with we're probably about half of our workforce has some type of money guy overlap where we did find them through the show.
Yeah.
Where does somebody need to go if they're looking for these
Great
details?
Question. Aboundwealth.com/careers. We also have a careers page on moneyguy.com. So we've tried to make it pretty easy to find. That will give you the full job description so you can see exactly what you're applying for. And it will also give you the email address and like who to email about that specific job. So aboundwealth.com/careers is the best place. We'll have our team throw it in the chat and in the comments too, so you can hopefully find it really easily.
And then I think it would be crazy if we didn't mention it. How abundant cycle is it that we actually give you a tutorial on how to interview for the money guy in Abound Wealth by creating this? No other employer is actually going to tell you their big key points like we just did.
Here's
so I don't know
if exactly looking for.
Yeah, I feel like we spoiled the magic trick, but we just gave you your great roadmap on how to stand out in the whole process.
All right, if you haven't already, go ahead and get your financial questions in the chat. We have our team putting some questions in the hopper here in front of us, and we're going to answer some questions.
Bo's going to kill us when he sees this replay. He's going to be like, how did y'all talk 23 minutes on a lead-in? We're supposed to do 10-minute lead-ins to the Q&A show, and somehow I did a mini show. So I'll go ahead and apologize to Bo since he's not here to bust it up on me, because it's all my fault.
Usually I try to keep you guys on task,
it's my fault.
I went off task
I told way
today.
too many stories. But let's answer some questions.
Yeah. All right, let's start with the career one. Caden on YouTube, he said, all right, here's kind of like one of those hot interview questions or like gotcha questions sometimes. What is the best way to answer the question, what is the minimum acceptable salary? Right? That's kind of a touchy subject. But Caden said, in the past, I have both lowballed it and then they need no further negotiations. That's nice. But he's also tried to highball it, but then they sometimes have moved on to another candidate because they couldn't afford him. And so he said, I'm using market data to base my salary on, but it still feels like a catch-22. Like, how do you decide what is the best way to answer that question?
This is a great question, and this is something I think anybody who's ever gone for a job, you struggle with. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you some things you can do for yourself. First of all, this needs to be pre-planned in the beginning, meaning you need to do, before you show up for the interview, you kind of need to know the salary range. Whenever somebody posts a job, hopefully they're going to give you some indication of what the potential salary could be. If they didn't, maybe in a very tactful way, because you don't want to seem like you're money hungry, but you ought to find out, hey, give me the range. I just want to make sure I'm a good fit for this role. What are the salary ranges that you're considering for this position? Because most job descriptions are written in, hey, like our financial advisor, 2 to 5 years of experience. And you can know, okay, well, if it's 2 to 5 years of experience, the range, they tell me this is going to be the range. You then can evaluate, okay, do I have all the experience they're asking for? Do I have all the credentials they've asked for? If you check all the boxes in the description, you probably qualify for the tippity top of their range. But also be honest with yourself. If you know they ask for 2 years to 5 years of experience for a role and you're 2 years and 1 month, you're probably not going to be at the tippity top of what they told you of the range. You might be at right at that entry level or crossing point of what they had presented. This is one of those skill sets where, if you've ever watched the movie The Firm, where Tom Cruise walks in the room with this law firm that turns out to be very evil, by the way. So I don't know if there's another side lesson there, but it is one of those things where they're like, if you're really good at what at the position, if you're who we think you are with the position we want to put you in, you'll tell me what this offer letter is without even opening the envelope. And Tom Cruise, in a really cool scene, walks through all those different things that went into the decision making of what the offer was, and of course he was right, because he had a script to tell him what the true number was. but it is something you ought to do, that exact same exercise yourself, because the question will come up, and it's always a difficult conversation for your employer. It's a potential employer. It's a difficult conversation for you. So the best thing you can do for a difficult situation, go ahead and start role playing, figuring out what it's going to be, so it won't be the first time you've experienced it when you actually do it in real life.
Yeah, good answer. All right, we actually have a couple more.
You're more affirming than Bo. I don't know if Bo ever gives me good answers.
Good answer,
so I like
Brian.
that. I like that.
Good. I like it.
It feels
that's
like
what I can
warmed
bring
up,
to the
ready to go with the
table
next
here.
one.
All right, let's see. This is an interesting one where finance kind of meets employment. Kristen on YouTube said, is it best to try to time your departure from an employer only after you've been fully vested in their retirement plan? Because we talk about how powerful the 401k is and how it's step 2 in financial order of operations. How does a financial mutant navigate this tough decision?
Look, I'm always shocked. Let me just give you some experience shares here and stories, and then I'll tell you what I did for myself. Is that when I was in government, I was a school board member and a county commissioner. I was always shocked at when a police or fireman person would leave after, say the pension vested at 5 years, they would leave at 4 years, 6 months just to go make an extra $2,000 a year at a precinct in another county or municipality. And I always be like, that's so sad. They didn't know that if they would have worked 6 months, I don't care if they were going to make $2,000 more a year at this other job, that pension was going to be very valuable, the portion that would be fully vested at that point. And they didn't think about that. So I would tell anybody who's thinking about changing a job, you better write down all the incentives, the timing of those incentives, and what your rights or abilities to receive those benefits are, so you can know, because you're trying to begin with the end in mind. You better go ahead and start thinking about those things on the front end. You don't think about that after you put it in your resignation letter, because then you're like, what? Because then also, here's a rule to look for. Be careful asking this, but you might want to just ask in a plan document. See the plan document or see the summary plan description of your retirement plan benefits, is because there's last day provisions too. If you didn't finish out the calendar year with that employer, you might not qualify for some of the profit sharing and bonuses and other things. And that leads to what I did. I knew my dad passed away in 2000. It was December of 2000. I had my everything fell off. I felt like sometimes when you go through tragedy or trauma, you get this clarity of focus that is almost like a superpower, because everything else, all the noise disappears, and you're able to really focus on what's important in your life. And that clarity after my dad passed away, and while I was in my 20s, was like, man, I need to do life completely differently than I'm doing right now. And that's what led me to want to start my first company. But it took me a year and a few months to actually go from conception of the idea to actually execution of the idea. And part of that was employee benefits. I knew that my employer had incredible year-end bonuses. So there's no way I was going to go resign to start my company in November. That would be just knuckleheaded. I mean, so I put in my notice on February 15th because I wanted to make sure that I got that year-end bonus. That also allowed me to have another year of vesting on my retirement plan. All that went into, and it gave me a year and months to save the cash reserves to build the bridge to get me through those 3 years of building my company up. You're kind of really not setting yourself up for success if you don't take into account all the benefits, all the financial needs that will be required to be successful, because passion and talent are very important in leaving and going to your next opportunity, but preparation is a key part. So use that not only for entrepreneurial type of endeavors, but also when you're changing jobs.
Yeah, and that was good advice, because it's true. If it's 6 months to a year in advance, it's like away from being fully vested and getting that big benefit. It's like, okay, let's really think about what's going to be best in the long term.
You got to control not only the emotional side, but the analytical side, and figure out the path that takes both into account.
Yes. All right, we've got a question from Neil. This is a little bit different, but I'm really interested to see what you say. He says, my 10-year-old wants to be an engineer, which is like cool. Like, he's starting to dream about what he might do someday. But Neil's asking, how can I keep him on track to do so, right? Because that's a really good career choice for him. How can he keep him motivated? And I mean, can he? What's your opinion?
Well, this is that age-old dilemma that all parents have, is that how do you guide your children without them realizing you're guiding them? And this is like, those are not the droids you're looking for. You're trying to figure out how you can Jedi mind trick your children into making the decisions, because if you just tell your kids what you want them to do, they'll do the exact opposite. So the first thing, if your 10-year-old says they want to be an engineer, hey, whatever you're doing, if you just did this accidentally or if they have the aptitude, because I also think as I get older, I have an 18-year-old now and I have a soon-to-be 12-year-old in the next week. A lot's baked into that recipe right as they come out. So, I mean, there's obviously a lot of good stuff going on. I love that a 10-year-old is saying they want to be an engineer, and I think the way that you encourage that is maybe embrace that aptitude. I mean, because one of the things I've done with my daughter that I've been so happy we've been able to create these opportunities is, like, during the summer she goes to camps, for creative camps, to draw, to do Minecraft. I remember we did a summer Minecraft camp that was like a week or two at a college campus. I'm like, what are we doing? But, she loved it. And I think those type of things will help, nurture the talent so it can grow. Because you think about, if you go read Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell covers, like, Bill Gates. One of the things that was interesting about Bill Gates is that one of the reasons Bill Gates is who he is because he had access to a mainframe computer when he was in the 7th grade. Meanwhile, the rest of the country, nobody had access to mainframe computers because they were so brand new. But here's young 7th grade Bill Gates, who had his 10,000 hours of access before the rest of the world did, that made him into, to embrace the talent and the passion and turn it into something. I would do the same thing, but just don't burn them out. I mean, I think that's why you have to keep a healthy balance of encouraging in a Jedi way that's not so in their face that they can tell, hey, you're trying to get me to do this, but also creating enough life experience so they're going and making sure that engineering is what they should be doing. But I love, because as you know, I've done so many shows on good degrees to get in college, and engineering, like, dominates any of the STEM type jobs and majors that you focus on in education do incredibly well. So just nurture that passion. Do the summer camps, do the things that will allow that to occur without you seeming like you're trying to force it upon them, because that never works out.
Yeah, and sometimes you can even just help him dream about, like, the types of jobs that he could have. Like, I remember my dad did that really well with us. Like, if we showed aptitude for something that could become a job, he was sort of like, oh, well, here's some of the things you could do with it. Or like over time, like, oh, you could be a reporter. You could be like, just all these different things.
Well, I think
and that was helpful
and
just
like
to
I said,
visualize it.
the recipe is baked in a lot of
Yeah.
ways because, like, I was on a triple date this weekend, and one of the husbands that we were out with, he's a brilliant architect, and he was talking about that he just finished this like mega Lego set. So I mean, this is a grown man who's in his 40s, super successful, still doing Legos. Like I said, it's baked into the recipe kind of already. So those habits and hobbies that you start as a 10-year-old probably going to continue to play out in adulthood too. I mean, I'm kind of like, I would love to play more video games. I just don't have time to do that. But it's one of those things where I think the things you're doing as a 10-year-old will probably be the things you do as a 40-year-old if it fits into your aptitude and your passions.
Yeah. All right, here's another interview question. This is from Clef10 on YouTube. He says, people say you shouldn't ask about PTO in the interview process, but that's a major factor to me, like with his family being out of state. So how and when is the right time to ask about these type of policies, these type of considerations?
I think it's one of those things that after the interview is going really well and you're getting to the verge of even maybe you've already started getting an offer from them, or it's in such a comfortable way that you can bring that up. Because here's the thing, I don't think you lead with that. I mean, because it does when you're starting, and I hate to sound, because it does sound like, man, they don't want to give me time off. No, they want to give you time off. They just worried. I think what most employers are worried about, if you're already asking about time off, like, this person hadn't even started working here, and they're already trying to figure out how they can get out of working here.
Right.
And that can be a narrative or a visual you don't want to plant in their head when you're trying to stand out. But if you do get far enough into the process, be honest about what your family commitments and other things are, because I think that's the appropriate time after you've kind of warmed them up that they're already daydreaming about, man, it will be great when we get this person in the office. They're going to be the perfect person to fill this position. When you start getting into what my salary will be, what will the benefits, it might be important to bring that stuff up then. Because look, whenever I'm interviewing people and they say, look, I'm excited to start working, I'd love to come, do this, but we planned a family vacation, or we planned a trip over to New Zealand, and it's going to take 2 weeks out of my life, and we've planned this for the last 5 years. It is so weird to ask a brand new employer if I can take 2 weeks off, starting in September. I think they would rather hear that in the beginning, and instead of you springing it on them after you accept the position, and just be honest and be like, and then, just like in the process, you could be like, look, I have out-of-state family. We're raising these kids all by ourselves. We don't have anybody here. So we're probably around the holidays, around Christmas or Thanksgiving, I'm probably going to need to take a week off every year just to go visit them. But I will make sure that I take my computer, I work from home, or I can work on the road to make sure I'm checking in. You can do things to mitigate the situation, but you want to get them so warmed up to you that they're daydreaming about you joining the team, but that's probably when. And then just make it more of an honest discussion, a transparent discussion on what your expectations are, and make sure it fits in. Now, if they tell you right then and there, no way, no how, because I worked at a company, well, I didn't work, a company in the building that I had one of my businesses in. I remember the poor receptionist had to take a cordless phone into the bathroom. And I remember thinking, that is a horrible indicator that this place might not really appreciate their employees if they're taking cordless phones into the restroom. That's a weird thing just in general. The same thing probably could be an indicator if you, after you've warmed them up, you've done everything appropriate, but you just, because you want to be transparent, you get into those discussions and they tell you no way, no how. That's probably a pretty good indicator that you're going to need to really think about, is this the place I want to work? Because I always think paid time off is one of those things where it shouldn't really matter. I think most employers, if it's, at least this is the way I look at it, I'm not really actively looking at how much time employees are taking off, because I'm assuming I can tell my employees who are engaged in trying to make this firm a better place. And then it's over the years, I don't know of anybody we have in the workforce right now, but I have had employees in the past where you just could tell they don't want to be here. I mean, and that's
Yeah.
the biggest thing. So I don't think most employment opportunities, if you're doing and you're carrying the weight you're supposed to, it's just not that big of a deal. That's just a policy. It's sitting in the background, but it's definitely something you could bring up after you've warmed them up. Don't
Yeah.
put it on the front end, because if you haven't warmed them up, you might run them off. Always, it's kind of back to bringing it back to dating. I knew I wasn't the best looking guy when I was out in the dating pool, but I knew I was funnier than most guys. So I always was trying to, when I would be in a group of people, tell enough jokes so that maybe you would catch the eye of somebody who is. And I think you can do the same thing with your employment. You don't lead, because with your insecurities or the things that you think are negatives, and asking for time off right from the get-go might push this thing in the ditch before you even had your opportunity.
It's funny how many dating parallels there are to jobs, because it's true. Like, you wouldn't, on the first date, you're not going to talk about, when you want to get married.
Yeah,
Or like,
because you'll
how many
come off
kids you
being
want
like,
to
"Oh my
have.
gosh, you're that crazy person."
Yeah, so,
but
like,
even that's a reasonable thing you want to talk about.
Exactly. You have to talk about it at some point, right? If you're looking for
Yeah.
a long-term relationship. But and same thing with PTO. That's not a weird question at all. Like, I wouldn't be weird if somebody asked me that, but like, yeah, on the first interview at the end, when I say, "Do you have any questions for me?" and the first thing you say is PTO, that's kind of a turn off.
Well,
It's
we're,
true.
we're kind of a financial order of operations type place. Go to
That's
moneyguy.com/resources, and we have our financial order of operations. But I think that this would be like a job order of operations, is that know the time and place to ask for those things, and it's definitely not on the front
Yeah,
side.
it's just a little down the road.
Yep.
All right. Matthew on YouTube asked us a financial question. He says he's 25 years old. Both his wife and he and his wife have both Roth 401k options. Is it smart to go straight for the full Roth 401k and IRA, or should he contribute to the 3-bucket strategy? Can we max out all 4 accounts? So let me just summarize this a little bit. Should he go and max out the Roth IRA and the 401k, or like all 4 of them, or should he go into the 3-bucket strategy now?
Point of clarification, was he asking, should he max out all 4 accounts, meaning Roth 401ks, Roth IRAs for him and his wife? Or is he stating, I am maxing out all 4 of these accounts?
He says we can max out all 4 accounts that we
can
have. So they
max
can.
out.
So
So
that's
they
the
have the
thing.
capability.
They have the capability, which is like awesome. Congrats. So what he's saying is it best to do all 4, or is it time to maybe allocate some of that money to like the hyper accumulation step in financial order of operations?
First of all, I always think you gotta show graciousness or thankfulness and tell people attaboys when they're doing something. Matthew, if you and your spouse are 25 years of age and can max out Roth 401ks that allow you to fund $19,500 each, and then $6,000 in each of your Roth IRAs, wowzer!
Woo.
Y'all must have. Mama and Daddy must be very proud of because that's what I when I hear that, I'm like, what was I doing at 25? I was like, definitely not able to max out 401ks. So that's a kudos. I mean, well done, Matthew. It means you're probably in something very technical, very specialized, and you've been rewarded. Keep it up. You're a financial mutant. So I think that this is a great question, because it is one of those things. Now, here's what's a little conflicting, because I don't know all Matthew's details, but if you can max out that much, you got to be in a pretty high income situation. So then you get into, I'm worried about taxes, so should do traditional or Roth. But then I remember he's 25, and at 25, tax-free growth is pretty phenomenal because of the compounding. Remember, when you can turn $1 for a 20-year-old into $88 at age 65, you want to get as much of that into a tax-free account as possible. So I think Matthew being 25, there's tremendous compounding opportunity. But he is also in the position of life where he's got to figure out house down payments, what do they want to do long term, and then that the triple bucket strategy. Because when Matthew's talking about, if you want to go download this, go to moneyguy.com/resources. We have our financial order of operations deliverable here, and here's what Matthew's talking about. If you think about it, he's gone through step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because he's already maxed out his Roth, he's already maxed out his 401k. He's asking if he should go to step 7, which is the 3-bucket strategy and hyper accumulation. And I would say, yeah, it's definitely something to take into account because like I said, you're going to have some life needs. I don't know if they're going to grow a family. I don't know if they're going to buy a house. You're probably going to have access to a brokerage account. Now, it is one of those unique things where with Roth accounts, you do have the ability to pull out your initial contributions in those Roth IRAs if you were trying to either or it. But that's not usually my favorite thing. I'd love for you to keep that money working tax free, and then just build up. But somebody who's saving this much, I think that if it's a this or that, you could consider that opportunity even with your Roth IRA contribution, since you have so much in Roth 401ks. I think that plays into it. But I did want to close out for Matthew with make sure you're enjoying each season of life too, Matthew, because at 25 years of age, making great incomes, I think as long as you're saving greater than 25% of your income, make sure you are earmarking some of that for life and fun too, because you're only going to be in your 20s once. You're only going to be in your 30s once. And I've had to have that conversation with Bo, because I think all achievers, all of us are wired to go through the checklist of life and make sure we're putting the tick mark on each of those life goals. But make sure one of those goals is also deep breaths, traveling, enjoying, making memories. Because time, I can tell you as a guy who's approaching I'll be in my 5th decade, not too distant future. It's moving too fast. So just make sure you're enjoying it all, Matthew. But kudos and congratulations. I can't wait for you to experience the abundance cycle with your success reaches such a point that you'll need to reach out to Abound Wealth to help you manage all your success.
All right, next we got a question from Carlos. He said, he's 24 and an electrical engineer.
Oh, awesome.
However, I'm considering leaving engineering for the family business, which is electrical contracting. Mm-hmm. Any advice on what he should consider?
I mean, not to be a nerdy accountant, but I always love the old T-column test where you put the positives on the left and the negatives on the right of each situation. And then you got to play it out. And I think you might have multiple T columns. You might have T columns for personal, meaning fulfillment and happiness. So maybe because if it's a family business, there's other indicators outside of just money. If it's, helping out loved ones. But then you need to also have a T column for long-term opportunity and prospects. And then you've got to balance those. That's the hard part, and that's the customization of why I love being a financial planner, is because we help take all those different data points as well as the emotional components, the analytics, the emotion, and then kind of create a plan off of it. And you're going to have to do that, Carlos. You're going to have to kind of navigate those features and kind of put on your future glasses there. I was trying to make a DeLorean joke, Back to the Future type reference, but in reality, you just need to kind of pen to paper, create a plan of plus and minuses, and then figure out what's the right move. Because, family businesses are great. They can be complicated. I mean, I've worked with a lot of sons, daughters, and parents that, it's always a hard walk. It's very fulfilling, very good if it's going well, but it's also very hard if it's not going well. So I would definitely balance those tracks and figure out what's going to give you the best path forward. So I know I love giving answers where I can practically give you a formula, and if you just do step 1, step 2, step 3, you'll be right there. I think with deciding between electrical engineering, outside of the family business and the family business, you got to do your homework and then navigate it personally. It's more of a custom decision.
It's more of a priorities thing.
At least it's in the same, dealing with electricity. A lot of that electrical engineering will be, pay off tremendously even in the family business.
Yeah, it's definitely a reasonable, a jump that makes sense. All right, we have a question from Josh on YouTube. He said, I own a condo and will be buying a house in a few years. I'm considering keeping the condo and renting it out. What are some factors in deciding whether to rent the condo or whether to invest that money instead?
Yeah, I mean, and especially if he found us on YouTube, there's so many passive income YouTube shows talking about how great it is to do rental property, and it can be great. I mean, to some degree, it's just as long as you do it at the right time and place, and you have a big enough safety net underneath you to make it through all the ups and downs of the situation. But it is one of those things that you need to think about this from a tax standpoint too. So when Josh asked about, he has a condo that likely is appreciated. I mean, in this real estate market, everything is pretty much appreciated. And he's trying to figure out, do I just keep renting it out, or do or sell it and take the money and invest it somewhere else? Here's the thing I always want to remind people. There is a unique thing with primary residences. As long as you live in a house 2 of the last 5 years, and it's your primary residence, if you're a single individual, there's $250,000 of capital gains that will be excluded from taxation. If you're a married couple, it's $500,000, and that's an incredible benefit. So whenever you turn a primary residence into a rental, the day you make that decision, you have a clock ticking in the background that within the next 2 to 3 years, you have to decide, am I going to sell this thing and take that tax-free gain? So, because if you hold it longer than 3 years, you can't, it's no longer a tax-free gain for you. So that's a very valuable benefit that you'll need to take into account, and don't just throw it away because you get excited about passive income or becoming a landlord. That's something I like to give numbers to that so you can think about it. And then also ask yourself, how involved will I be as a landlord? Everybody who I have as a client and everybody I know personally that's super successful in real estate, it's not passive income. They're all very involved in a good way with their rental portfolios, meaning that because they're making sure that people aren't changing their engines out in the middle of the living room, that they're not ripping the doors off of the cabinets.
Do you know that from personal experience,
Yeah,
Brian?
that's why I give those, because what's funny,
Yeah.
I told this story because I had a client down in Georgia that had a lot of rental properties, and he was like, you wouldn't believe when these tenants leave. I found out one was changing engines in the middle of the living room. Like the whole engine lift was physically rolled into the engine, and he's rebuilding an engine right there in the living room with oil dripping and everything else. So you can imagine what that does to the living room. I tell that story on a previous podcast, and then somebody told me that they had an apartment building that on the second floor of their apartment building that they owned, somebody had created a ramp and was repairing motorcycles inside the apartment. I kid you not. Yeah. So I'm not the only one that has these experience shares of dealing with clients. So and there's nothing wrong with being a rental landlord. Just know it's not passive, and you just need to be prepared. But don't walk away without understanding that tax-free gain that comes from your primary residence, because there's very few benefits that good in tax policy, and that's completely legal. I mean, there's a reason a lot of builders I know live in houses 2 years, build another one, 2 years, build another one, because they can't. That, if you think about it, if you're a married person getting $500,000 a year of benefit, if you're in an appreciating market like Nashville has been, I mean, do that by 2. You can see that this person is essentially making $250,000 a year tax-free income just by moving every 2 years, because they happen to have the skill set to build houses at cost, sell them at market, and you too can figure out some type of hack with that. But don't walk away and turn something into a rental property and without at least checking the box that you looked into that tax-free gain opportunity.
Yeah. All right, we've got another question from Scott on YouTube. I think our topic of standing out in an interview struck a nerve because we have like a lot of interview questions in here. And he said, are there any tips for interviewing within the financial industry? He says he's pretty far along for a job at Fidelity, and he really wants it. So he just wondered if you had any advice.
I'm going to give some advice to the whole broad financial industry interview, because that's now I know Fidelity. Fidelity's, we have relationships with Fidelity, Schwab, and I know others, and those are good companies. So they're probably not the Burnham and Churnham type employer, but there are others that I can't speak so friendly of, that because this is the thing about the financial industry. We all know the wonderful world of finance can be lucrative. There's a lot of, when you go look at billionaires and a lot of millionaires, you see it's not by accident that a lot of them made their money in finance.
Sure.
So a lot of people want to be part of that, but there's also the negative that there's a lot of companies that are set up to take advantage of that excitement that surrounds the financial industry. And it's hard to know if you're being hired to work actually in the financial industry versus are you being hired to go sell products and probably run through your friends and family as resources, because there's a lot of businesses set up to where you think you're getting in the financial industry, but really all you are is a process to get access to your friends and family's contact list, run through the sales of products to them, and then you wash out of the financial industry and go somewhere else. So my tips for interviewing with, so that's the first thing. Understand how you'll get paid in your job. If it's selling, just know if you're truly a salesperson, because there's a lot more sales jobs in this profession than there are consulting jobs. Now, I'm going to assume for somebody like Scott, who is doing more of a consulting, or maybe it's truly a job where you can go learn a skill, learn a trade, apply that to grow within the field, is that the first thing, Scott, is just show your enthusiasm for what you want to do for Fidelity. And I would know the whole Fidelity story. I'm sure you've done your research on them. What makes, I think, is so interesting about Fidelity is it's a private company.
Mm-hmm.
Here we have one of the largest providers of 401ks, holds investments for so many folks. And this is, you try to go look up what Fidelity is worth, try to go look up, the ticker symbol for Fidelity, and you'll see, nope, the Johnson family owns it. And I mean, that's an amazing, I don't know if that helps you for the interview, but it is something you need to understand how Fidelity works. And here's my tip. Go find somebody who works at Fidelity right now and interview them. Just like I told you, I got my first job by interviewing a client of the firm I wanted to work for. It shouldn't be too hard for you to go find somebody at Fidelity that you can interview or ask questions of, to give you some experience shares, to make sure this is something that you want to work for this company. And then you can make sure that you drop your due diligence and your research, because that's probably going to be important in an investment job, in the interview process. I mean, because there's what I like about Fidelity employees when I talk to them is they do a great job. It kind of reminds me of the Mayo Clinic and other these big legacy employers that essentially get you in there and you can't leave because the golden handcuffs are just so sweet that you're essentially in your gilded, awesome workplace.
Mm-hmm.
I almost said prison, but it's not, because you
No.
like working.
Yeah.
But it is one of those things. I know a lot of people that work at Fidelity, and they have great bonuses, great incentive packages, and other things. So it makes sense for you to go show your excitement for Fidelity by going a step above and beyond and going and interviewing, employees or people that have some type of relationship with Fidelity, and then using that in the process.
Goes a really long way. All right, we've got a tax question from Christian. He says, how can we handle taxes for a large bonus at an employer? It looks like it's going to be 6 figures. He did put that in here. Taxes are going to be withheld, but it will place them into a much higher tax bracket. Should we have them set aside extra just in case? So how should he handle tax implications?
I love this question
bonus?
from a tax preparer standpoint and a guy with a tax background. This question should be asked a lot more, because people get bonuses. Here's what I don't think anybody understands about your compensation, and especially with bonuses. When they calculate, when your employer, when you do that W-4 form when you first start working for a company, that's your withholding form. You're trying to figure out how much taxes to withhold. And when you get paid, they take whatever your monthly paycheck is, they multiply it, by either 12, 24, or 26, depending on how often you're paid. And then they apply that against the tax tables, and then they withhold accordingly. Well, you can imagine when you get a bonus, a huge bonus, like a 6-figure, they're going to go multiply that by 12, 24, 26. It's going to look like you are Daddy Warbucks and you make $1 gazillion a year. So they're going to withhold probably the tippity top of the taxes. They'll probably withhold 37% on the federal and probably whatever, in whatever your state income tax is. And so you might find out that, wow, 45% of my bonus just disappeared through tax withholding. Well, from doing your own taxes, and probably in year 2 of getting these bonuses, you're like, man, I get huge refunds when I do my tax returns, and you just keep getting huge refunds. There might be a better path, and I'm so glad Christian's asking about this, because when I was actually working in tax preparation, one of the key things I did for clients who were in these situations is, let's not just be a passive person who gets huge bonuses and goes through this process. gets the bonus, waits the 8 or 9 months when we file our tax return to get our big refund back, because maybe there's something I could be doing with this money. Maybe I could be saving more for retirement. Maybe I could be doing 529 money. Maybe I could be proactive with saving more in the company retirement plan or deferred comp plan if I just planned a little bit better for my taxes. So, Christian, here's the answer to your question. You got to do your homework. First thing you want to do is reach out to your HR department, figure out, hey, will y'all let me get creative with bonus planning? Since this is a special once a year cash flow payment, will y'all let me email you to the HR or payroll department how much I actually want withheld from the paycheck? Will you let me do a custom retirement plan contribution on this one-time bonus? Because you might be surprised that they will. I mean, you have to ask the question first, and if the answer comes back, yeah, sure, we understand this is a pretty common thing we do for executives, we do custom, you'll need to go run a tax projection, get the answer from HR or payroll department first before you go hire the CPA to do all the work. But then go run a tax projection, either hire somebody or do it yourself, because this is big numbers, so you might want to hire somebody to make sure you don't know what you don't know. And then once you run the numbers, figure out exactly how much the tax impact would be, figure out if there's some planning opportunities, like I said, with the employer retirement plan, and then back into how you want to use this benefit of time and knowledge to apply it to your finances in this bonus.
Yeah.
That's how I would do it.
Good answer. You love a good tax question. I can.
Well, I mean, it's just, but so many people just like, ho hum, huge bonus, love it, but I'm only going to get 50% of it, but I'll get a big refund later. I'm like, yeah, but there's a better way if you just will go ask the questions. It's like most things in life, you get rewarded the more preparation and the more research and assertiveness into the situation you present. If you're just passive in your life, things are going to pass you by that you didn't get to maximize.
Yeah. All right, we've got a question from Natasha. She said she loved our topic today about how to nail your interview. She said, I'm in the middle of the process now. Her question is, when does philosophy and values outweigh pay and benefits? And now, as the resident creative here, I just feel like I needed to say something. I'm sure you have something to say about this too. But I would say a big thing for me has been priorities and life circumstances. Like, I had jobs before this. The Money Guy Show was not my first job that I loved the people, loved what I did. But like, there wasn't as much of a career path. There weren't as many opportunities for career growth. And when I got married, when I wanted to buy a house, when I was thinking about having kids, when I was just getting older and like wanted to do different things in my life, all of a sudden it was like, well, I do think this is really fun, but like, is there something more? Is there a different avenue? And so I would say, like, do you have the freedom to be able to choose the passion over the benefits? Because sometimes when you're in the messy middle, or like me, really just entering the messy middle, when I found the Money Guy Show, the benefits and the pay were important. Like, it was something that was more of a factor than it was when I was 22 and just out of college and like, hey, let's give this a try. So I know that's not like the step-by-step thing, but your question really resonated with me because I did take a more creative career path that isn't, as high paying theoretically, unless you are really innovative, I guess. But that has been my experience. I just think it's important to point out that it really depends where you are in your life, I think.
I think this is the age-old question that there's so many things in life that you have to figure out the balance between different scenarios. There's comfort, there's risk. I always and I'll put it to this way. I have an experience share, and then I think about the show. Like, I know there's ways I could grow this show. Like, if Bo did this show topless, meaning he didn't wear a shirt, it would go. No, we would probably have more viewers. But I'm just not willing to. You always have to balance what is appropriate for you, because everything's always going to be custom. What represents you, and maybe that's a horrible example, but I think that the same thing happens when you're looking at a job, because there might be a company that offers you tons of money, but you just disconnected from how they make their money, and I think that is a huge problem. If yes, you could get offered all this money, but you're disjointed from philosophy or the quality of life it creates for you, you have to figure out how do you reconcile that. And here's my experience share. First job out of college, I worked at this accounting firm. I absolutely loved my boss. Man, and I'm old enough now that I've gotten the full circle moment where I've gotten to go back and talk to him. And this firm was incredible from quality of life, but they way underpaid me. And how do I know they way underpaid me? When I went and put in my resignation, they offered me a pretty much, it was at least a 50 to 60% pay raise on the spot, meaning that the pay was going to even be bigger than the new job I'd already accepted. And so that's how I knew that I was underpaid, and I knew that going into it. But I loved that firm, and it was great. Quality of life was awesome. Pay just wasn't figured out. Second job I went to paid better, but man, it was very corporate in its field. Now, they were great business people. I learned so many skills working at that second firm on how to be a great business person, a great planner, and other things. So there's wins with both of those situations. But you had quality of life here, you had money here, and you're trying to figure out, and that's what I kind of tried when I created this company. I tried to create the best of both worlds for my employees. But that is something that I think Natasha has to kind of really be honest with herself on. How do you balance these two things? Because what you're hoping is you get the best of both worlds, is that you can, maybe you don't make as much money, but you get enough, that still they're paying you well for the quality of life. Because I mean, I think about like Marcy here at the office, and I hope she doesn't get mad for me. We give her maximum flexibility on quality of life because, especially through this pandemic, it's been weird if you've got kids in school and you've got, and you're running around trying to navigate the family life, the work life, and other things. Mm-hmm. And I think she has been so great at telling us how much she appreciates that flexibility. And we're going to we offer that, and it balances. But Marcy could probably go get offered more money, but they're going to take away. So it's the perfect balance that she gets paid well, plus gets these huge benefits of time and flexibility. You're trying to maximize all the components you mentioned, whether it's money, whether it's the philosophy / quality of life. You're trying to maximize without jeopardizing because you can get it out of balance. That's why do we always talk about balance? Balance is a scale. So you're trying to make sure you're keeping those things at an equilibrium state. Whereas I think sometimes people get the big money, and those are the career changers that we talk to. They're making great money, but they're just miserable. They're not doing what God put them on this planet to do, but they're making great money, and that creates a weird dichotomy. And then there's other people, you're happy at what you're doing, but man, you feel broke. So that's you've got to figure out, is there an opportunity that balances those two things? And then have an open dialogue with your prospective employer about what your needs are. Don't spring this stuff on them. Like I said, you got to warm them up. It's kind of like a comedy club. You got to get somebody to come out there and get them going. You got them going, get them liking you, get them daydreaming about you working at the firm. But then once you get into discussions on pay and you get into discussions on flexibility because of family obligations and other things, be honest and open. Don't wait until you've negotiated the salary and then all of a sudden, 3 weeks into your new job, you're saying, by the way, Christmas, I'm going to be taking 2 weeks every year. Mm-hmm. No, you should have done that back at the beginning, not beginning, but back during the negotiation stage. So everybody knew where we were, because expectations being met is so much more powerful than if you spring it on people and play gotcha. Gotcha with jobs never works out well. I would tell you to have open dialogue. It's back to when I started the show, I wrote down How to Win Friends and Influence People is a very powerful book that sits behind me. Navigating relationships, navigating jobs, you want to treat people like you want to be treated, but also you're always trying to balance out those conflicting things of comfort, which is more money, versus quality of life. You have to figure out where's the equilibrium that balances out perfectly for you.
Yeah, good advice. All right, we've got a question from D.H. Villa. He says, this is a question for Brian. If I am a CPA working in public accounting and finance and accounting degrees, should I first work on getting the PFS certification or go straight for the CFA? So he's a CPA and he has an accounting and finance degree. What should he be going after?
First of all, man, You got a good one. That's CPA. Bo's not even here to defend it, but to pick on it, I should say. But I love if you ask me of all my designations what my favorite one is, that's CPA. I love being a certified public accountant, pay my membership dues, pay my renewals, do my continuing ed with a smile on my face, because it's a pretty good achievement. So first, kudos for being a CPA. So for those of you who don't know, he's asking about PFS means a personal financial specialist. That is a CPA that specializes also in doing personal finance or financial planning. I have both the CPA as well as the PFS because I am obviously a CPA that does financial planning. And then he's asking about CFA, which is Chartered Financial Analyst. My cohort, Bo, who's Reevy's occupying the seat today, but Bo has both the CFP as well as the CFA. And CFA is a tough one. I mean, I'll brag on Bo since he's not here. I normally try to keep him in check by picking on him a little bit, but since he's not here, CFA is a hard designation to get. I kind of feel like I bullied Bo into getting that one because it has 3 tests, takes approximately 3 years to get. And by the way, you would think, okay, 3 tests, they probably have a high pass rate. No, I think that there was even an article. This is like the lowest pass rate ever. I think it was below 40% on the first test. And then you'd think it would get better, but it's still like 50% pass rates on 2 and 3 too. It's horrible. I mean, it's just a hard process to go through. You see a lot of your mutual fund managers, your private equities, and others will have the CFA because it's really a designation that shows that you're really good at navigating the financial analysts, as the name implies, balance sheets, the financial statements. A CPA probably has a lot of those same skill sets, so it's going to translate well. But if you're going to, if the crux of this question is, what are you going to do with this? If you're planning on going into financial planning, because that's what the PFS would lead me to think, I'd also tell you there might be an option C, which is go get the CFP, because that's going to be more recognized publicly. More people know my certified financial planner than they know PFS. There's a reason I had to explain what PFS was. And then typically, if you have the CFP with work experience in personal finance, you can strap on the PFS by just paying extra money. That's the way it used to work. I don't know if it's changed, but you have to show the experience as well as the designation of CFP. That might be an option C. And then the CFA, if you think that you are going something that's more financially based, maybe you're moving to New York or you're in New York and you're going to be working for a big investment bank or something in that field, by all means, go for the CFA. It's a lot of hard work, but it's very lucrative. People do make great money that are CFAs. But if you're working in, personal finance, I'm more of the CFP, strapping on the PFS with that experience. And then if you want to, go get crazy and go hog wild and add them both later. But I will tell you, get to a certain age, I'm not getting any more designations. Yeah. But it's really what's the why. I hate to give you all that details with it and then come back to the biggest part is begin with the end in mind. Where are you trying to go with your career? And that's going to probably answer your question on which designation is best for you.
Yeah. Another really good answer. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted their question, who stuck around with us in the live chat. If you were here at the first part and you are interested in potentially working here in Franklin with us at the Money Guy Show and Abound Wealth, remember to go to aboundwealth.com/careers, or our careers page on moneyguy.com works just as well. That'll tell you all of our job openings and how to apply. And if you haven't been to moneyguy.com and checked out our resources page, we've got tons of free resources, more free financial advice that you can just download and reference anytime. Definitely check that out. It's there for you to help you on your financial journey.
Guys, thanks so much. I'm your host, Brian Preston. Filling in today, Miss Reevy did an awesome job.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. By the way, and so affirming. I loved it.
Oh, good.
And I felt like your excitement. So, when you start off that you're so excited, I think Bo will feel like he was well represented today. So thanks so much, guys. We love what we're doing here. We'll keep creating content. Money Guy team, out.